Welcome to AI for Business Leaders podcast. Welcome to another episode of AI Podcast. I am the founder and CEO of The Other Group, a strategic advisory firm that partners with commerce and AI technologies to unlock revenue opportunities and solve go-to-market challenges. With 20 years in commerce and SaaS and marketplace, I've spent my career at the intersections of commerce and technology. This podcast explores the future of AI for business leaders through conversations with founders, investors, and operators who are building what is next. So today we have a very special guest, Ron Lee. I am proud to call Ron a buddy. Ron is also the VP of Data Intelligence and Partnership Strategy at Phoenix Suns. And with 13 plus years of global experience spanning sponsorship, media, and global expansions across golf, esports, and now professional basketball. Ron brings a unique operator's perspective on the advent of AI, commerce, and fan engagement in sports, exactly the type of innovative leaders we need in the AI and commerce era. So good to have you on the pod, Ron. How are things going?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me on here.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we've been trying to coordinate this for a while, so really happy to have you on. And to give listeners a little bit of context, Ron and I actually met at a AAPI conference hosted by our mutual friend, Jason Wong. So shout out to Jason in Phoenix. And Ron was a fireside keynote speaker, and his background was really fascinating, along with a lot of insights that he had shared at the conference, which is why I basically hunted him down for this podcast. So to kick things off, like I mentioned, you had a fascinating global journey, right? Born in Hong Kong, raised across Singapore, Germany, and Canada, really a globetrotter, and then working your way through PGA Tour, EA, and consulting with major leagues and colleges, and now leading partnerships across NBA and WNBA franchises. So walk us through this arc, if you would. What common thread connects working on international golf expansion and all your journeys through transforming how the NBA team engages a fan through AI and commerce?
Yeah, to be honest, like when I was making the decisions, I didn't really plan it out that way. I just kind of pulled the best opportunity that like made my brain like itch or made my heart jump. That was what I did when I was making those decisions. But then now when I kind of look back across it all, in the sports world, right, today I think more now than ever, the sports world is more of a content, event, and experience economy more now than anything. It just happens to be around IP people love, right? Like you see this in Disney, Marvel. Sports is just like a really, really like powerful lightning rod when it comes to like building tribes of people. And when it comes to that economy, I feel like having worked at a league, a team, consulting in between, but then also a brand that invests in sports. I've sort of just sat from different perspectives of how people use those rights, whether you are selling them and operating against them, whether you're buying them from the brand side or whether you're just brokering, sort of deals in between. Having those different perspectives kind of has shown me two things so far in my life when you reconcile it with sort of the global upbringing. One, the globalization of sports is pretty real, and it's important to understand how different cultures consume sport. You look at the NFL and how probably in the next couple of years they're going to be playing a game almost every week in a different country. You look at MLB starting off its season overseas, the NHL going over there, and the NBA now, with the Suns just recently having started their season in Macau. And then you see it also like in other parts of the world, right? You see F1 expanding rapidly here in the United States. You see Premier League teams coming over here. You see the World Cup coming back over. So it's really interesting just as you think about how you expand your IP, why it's important to understand how different cultures process it. But then also too, I think if you're trying to reach new audiences, you can't really think of your business as an events-based business anymore, which is ironically how a lot of teams are built up to be. Sports now looks more like a content business more than ever because media is the most powerful way of being able to reach broad masses of audiences, right? So I think that would be like the second major thread that I think I've seen is just understanding how to reach people globally, but also understanding that you have to do it differently for different people.
Right. Now, as you kind of explain it, it makes a lot of sense. I feel like sports personally, like I mentioned to you a while ago, I'm obviously a fan of sports, also a former athlete as well. I like to describe sports as one of those things like food and also music where it's a global language, right? It doesn't matter where you're from. It doesn't matter what language you speak, but people understand sort of the soul and also the essence of all these things we're just talking about. And it is one of those rare activities or events that can bring everybody together no matter what the background is. So
Totally.
that makes a
That's
lot
a
of
whole
sense.
mix of irrational likes. Like some people like things other people hate. Some people like things that their moms and dads just grew up cooking or listening to and they like it, right? It's like, oh my God,
Right.
go talk to any Jets fan why they've been a Jets fan for more than a decade. And usually the answer is irrational, but that's something that there's something like quite lovely about that. And just getting to work around that irrational fandom is really fun.
Absolutely. And speaking of Jets fans, yeah, I know quite a few of them. Definitely they have a hard life in the past few years or so. But yeah, I mean, you also spent 5 years at PGA Tour, right? Helping expand that golf globally. And then you made what seemed like a radical pivot to electronic arts, EA, and competitive gaming. So what drew you from, the transition from fairways to the esports arena? And for listeners who might not know, can you explain a little bit about what it meant to commercialize esports at EA?
Yeah, sure. Honestly, I was just following really cool opportunity in the most basic way of answering that question. I joined the
Uh-huh.
tour because they didn't really have an international business. And in my mind, I didn't even play golf, by the way, at this point until I started there.
How
But in
did
my
you get the
mind, I was like,
job, by the way?
I that's a whole different story, and it's probably more about networking than it is about commerce or AI. But
Right.
I was a vigorous networker, and it paid off really well. Is the short answer. But the PGA Tour was this global tour. Like it was by far the world's best golf tour, and they never thought of themselves as a global business. And I was employee number 4 on it, so I thought, why wouldn't I try this? It's sort of the same thing at EA. You don't get a lot of things to build from scratch. You don't get any opportunities to build a lot of interesting businesses from scratch. So at EA, a mentor of mine was offered the opportunity just to build out a whole esports division there called the competitive gaming team.
Mm.
And that was it, really, to be honest. It was just, man, I have an entire opportunity to build a business unit in a Fortune 500 company in most years. So why wouldn't I do that? And the extra thing on top of this, Dennis, as you know, is when I was a kid, I was actually an esports professional myself. And so
Mm.
but I was born too early to be making ridiculous money that streamers were making. The streamers I was paying anyways. But in a really cheesy way, it was like a way for 30-year-old Ron to kind of like finish off like 14-year-old Ron's dream that he never really had. I know that sounds corny, but I did really see it as that way, but just to do it for different games. So commercializing esports at EA, the charge was pretty simple, right? Especially if you play video games. Our role was to create competitive leagues around games that it made sense for. So example would be EAFC, or what was known as FIFA at the time.
Uh-huh.
Madden, a first-person shooter called Apex Legends, and then also a game called The Sims were the ones we worked on the most. But any other game where it made sense to create a competitive program for it, we did. So creating a
Uh-huh.
competitive program for it essentially just means creating leagues out of it. How do you create a constitution for like competitive rules that all the teams, if there were teams, needed to abide by? How do you build revenue streams into it? Mostly first you start with media distribution, but then you also think about partnerships. And then are you going to actually also have live events? Because that was a big
Mhm.
one, right? Like it's
Right.
normal in sports, but if you thought about starting a new sport now, like if you look at Unrivaled with women's basketball, they
Right.
on purpose have a tiny venue that doesn't accommodate a lot of people. So like, how do we actually just drive revenue into this? Now, the fundamental difference between doing this in an esports capacity versus a sport is actually pretty significant, though. At the
Uh-huh.
sport, the professional level is usually the pinnacle of it. Like MLB is the top level of baseball you can find. NBA is the top level of basketball, right? They are all the pinnacle of their sport. Whereas, yeah, esports are the pinnacle of the competitive side of the sport. But at the end of the day, they really were a marketing vehicle for the game itself. So if you,
Right.
Dennis, were playing FIFA, or we were trying to get you to come play FIFA or EAFC, the goal of getting you to engage in esports was so that you would be motivated to go back into the game. We don't
Right.
really have that as direct of a charge with that in basketball, football, hockey, really any traditional sport. So I'd say that's the only real difference. But when it comes to commercializing esports, it's at its most basic premise, it's to create leagues out of
Mhm.
games for which it made sense.
Right. Right. No, thanks for that context. And right now, obviously, it's grown quite a bit as well. And we come across a lot of different opportunities when it comes to commerce of esports, what that could look like, whether it's from merchandising side or content side as well. So, and this is, obviously an AI podcast. And, you've been vocal about AI driven sponsorship measurement tools and data driven fan engagement. And given your role, you have a lot of insights and also expertise in that arena. So can you kind of break it down for the business leaders out there who are hearing a lot about on like AI buzzwords? As we know, AI, 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 AI. And I did mention this to a few people where AI really still at this point means different things for different people. And when I travel across the country, being that I'm based in Bay Area, there's a lot of builders out there, and AI to them, it goes anywhere from technical lingo all the way to business application. And then when I go to different types of cities like New York and also New York or also LA, there's different definition of AI. And then when I go to other countries, other cities, and then it means even the motivation or also the driving factor of how they interpret AI is very differently. So all that to say, how is AI to you, like for you, how is AI fundamentally changing how sports properties prove value to sponsors in understanding their fans?
I think there's I'll answer that in that sponsorship context, but I think also broader, right?
Yeah.
Sports is probably more like a lot of the out of the Bay Area examples that you mentioned here and how we interpret AI. I think it's much more everyman. You got your stereotypical
Mm-hmm.
assumptions that it jumps to generative AI or AI search platforms like ChatGPT, but really like for the most part, we have actually already been integrating AI into our week to week operations more than we think, but we haven't really just been calling it that, or we haven't really just built
Mm-hmm.
structures and processes around it. So in sponsorship measurement, for example, a very common way will be using AI, specifically in a visual capacity, to measure how much brand exposure somebody is getting. The
Mm-hmm.
most common way right now is thinking about it in broadcasts. So like how much is my logo being seen? How often, in what broadcast, for how long, how large is the presence? And then you can use that to convert into some kind of equivalent commercial value or media value. Those kinds of principles have actually already been sort of applied for a while because that's sort of been tied in with television viewership measurement and brand exposure measurement. But AI has just helped it get better, right? Like that's like a good theme
Right.
to AI is the focus should be on how it makes regular processes better. So when it comes to
Right.
sponsorship, that's a really big part of it. Think about what I just said with television, but then also replace it with social media. That's a much
Mm-hmm.
tougher place to be able to measure just
Sure.
because the sheer amount of content and oh my God, the different platforms and everything you got to measure. Also similar logic. But then if we also look at like other core parts of our business, when we think about like say ticket sales and service, so
Mm-hmm.
members, right? We, alongside many other sports teams around the world, deploy AI agents in managing season ticket holders.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it be chasing people who are overdue on their season ticket billing, whether it be re-engaging people that have lapsed,
Mm-hmm.
whether it be engaging new lists of people. This is really not that different from a lot of retail businesses, right? But except our product just
Sure.
happens to be a basketball team on the court instead of shirts and
Right.
hoodies. And so we've been kind of using this like many places use a hodgepodge, a variety of material, like a variety of resources in order just to make their lives easier. And I think now with the advent of generative AI and what we see like as like enterprise deployment, now we're starting to see sports catch up to it. So for example, you've got some teams right now that are experimenting with like enterprise level licenses of say like a Perplexity or a ChatGPT for their own
Mm.
internal purposes. They're using it to
Uh-huh.
really try to make their own internal processes work better, which is where fan engagement kind of comes in a little bit. You see
Mm-hmm.
it sometimes with automated marketing tools.
Sure.
Trying to like that would be one of many ways we think about layering like AI or AI like capabilities on top of our database just to make our lives easier, if that makes sense. There's nothing like new or groundbreaking. I mean, it's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds really groundbreaking
Mm-hmm.
because I think it sounds cool because it's in sports. But I don't think it's that different from a lot of from really any other industry. AI's core fundamental objective or purpose right now is just to make a lot of things we do easier and faster.
Sure. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And we see that across the board as well. We do know, I think this is, everybody will agree, we're still at the very sort of early stage forefront of AI. So a lot of applications really optimize from a volume perspective. I think what's really difficult at some point is going to be the quality aspect. And obviously, the hallucinations has gotten much better compared to, let's just say, 6 months ago and 12 months ago. And I'm curious about this as well, since your role has deep sort of data aspect when it comes to consumer engagement. Have you seen any sort of specific applications where AI could generate, not only impact from a volume perspective of understanding insights, but also qualitatively impact how you guys make decisions at the end of the day? So from a predictive standpoint, are there any examples such as that?
I could give you examples of what I want to do and I'm endeavoring
Okay.
towards because like you said, a lot of us we're still building and trying to kind of figure like we're still in like very much in the building process, but
Sure.
A sports team will never volume wise have as like the sheer amount of customers that I think most enterprise applications of or really enterprise applications of customer facing technology would, like say an Old Navy, Aeropostale, like mass volume. Because for the most part,
Uh-huh.
we focus a lot on monetizing in our state from a ticket sales perspective, but then also, of course, we think about it sponsorship from a broader level. But when we're thinking about sponsorship, we don't really have to get as deep in terms of a one-on-one relationship with our customer as we
Mm.
really need to with ticket sales. So when we think about
Uh-huh.
it from a ticket sales perspective, deepening those relationships with people who are going to come in, this is very much like a 10-90, 20-80 rule in terms of how much revenue they contribute.
Uh-huh.
How could we use AI layered over our database in order to provide more personalized experiences to those fans? Because like, I don't know if you, I talked about Disney and Marvel earlier, right? Not everyone's going to be able to go to a Disney theme park. Not everyone's going to be able to go
Uh-huh.
to like a Universal, right? But they come up with
Uh-huh.
different ways for you to engage with the IP, whether it's on Disney Plus, whether it's on Hulu, whether it's going to retail. Sports teams are the exact same thing, but just different IP. Netflix is doing the opposite. It built its business on content, and now it's building physical experiences to build different touch
Uh-huh.
points with people. So for us
Uh-huh.
with sports and layering AI on top of the data that we have, it would help us figure out how we better do that. And the thing that we're really, really lucky, like we said earlier, is like we just work with people who rationally love the sun. So it's just our job to stock them better. And AI, frankly, can help us do a better job of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So also Phoenix Suns have been incredibly aggressive as far as like innovation, as far as like, partnerships.
Yeah.
And I think it goes to say that, it's probably a top-down cultural thing from, the ownership all the way, to you as well as people who are at the execution front. Can you give a couple examples to the listeners as far as, some of the partnership strategy and strategic thinking behind it? Because I think a lot of times what's difficult now, especially with AI, the world of the AI, it seems like there's a lot of opportunities out there. So maybe give a little insight in terms of as you guys think through a strategic partnership, there's a lot of different opportunities. How do you decide what's worth the investment and what's just beside shiny objects that you guys are trying to stay away from?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think the easiest way is first what it means to our business and is it relevant enough? So we go through like a pretty rigorous exercise here, and not just with technology, but any like
Mm-hmm.
category of thing that we could possibly create a partnership for. And first we assess like how much of our business is our bit like is the business area around this. Cybersecurity would be like one really good example. Cloud
Mm-hmm.
networking, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, is this thing big enough for us to consider building a partnership around? And so that we can really like get something more out of this with a partner? Or is this something that we really only care about within our business because it's really not that big, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
that, it's really important to first have that lens because then we start, because the last thing that you want to do when we're thinking about partnerships is, man, how much of people's time and energy do we really want to consume for something that's not even going to materially impact our business, whether it be partnership revenue or the operation of the business?
Mm-hmm.
Technology, I think, is really important for that. This has to make sense for us. So that's usually the first lens, but that's a pretty easy one. And then from there on, we really just start thinking about like what are the pressing needs and what exists on the marketplace and who could really use a great platform to showcase this. So
Mm-hmm.
two examples that come up really well for the Suns and the Mercury. I would say the first one would be Verizon's partnership with the Suns, which has led to its entitlement of the Verizon 5G practice facility in the Phoenix Scottsdale area. So
Mm-hmm.
Verizon's implemented their inside it, and it actually directly supports our coaching and medical and training staff with player data.
Mm-hmm.
And so what Verizon does is they actually use it as sort of a living laboratory to be able to take people through and showcase their technology. And so
Mm-hmm.
for us, we thought that was one, awesome, because it is truly a great asset for Verizon to support their business. But then also two, it literally helps the basketball product. So we love that because that makes a ton of sense
Right.
for us.
Right. Right. Right.
Another really good example on the business side would be the partnership that we and so they were very helpful in just really helping us challenge ourselves to think about what really is important to our business. And without getting too much into the details, we identified a lot of data strategy and data cleanup areas,
Sure.
ironically,
Sure.
to facilitate some of the engagement we talked about earlier. And so when
Right.
we were talking about working with Endeavor, the last thing that we wanted to do was just to be an extra place for them to put their logo. That's not
Mm-hmm.
really, I mean, that was obviously part of it because brand awareness and trying to create and reinforce brand equity was important to them. But we also wanted to be able to have something to showcase how our partnership would work in real life so that they could actually use that too while we empower our business. So that's really
Right.
how we think about it, as long as it passes that first checkpoint of, is this worth considering for our business or is this helpful enough for both parties, if that makes
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah, I think you kind of dove into it really quick, but just in case for those who don't know what Endava is, can you give a little bit background in terms of what the company is and what does it do?
Yeah, and Java, I mean, is almost a do-it-all company, right? They really focus on data services and technology consulting. So
Mhm.
there almost isn't anything that they wouldn't be able to do with somebody who had technology needs. And so while that sounds really great, what was really important when we were talking to them was for us to be laser focused about what they could work with us on so that they could create something for us. Their capabilities could have ranged anywhere from helping us with hardware in our arena that could help us better
Mhm.
track fan movement, and that could have turned into a
Mm.
partnership asset for us, right?
Mhm.
Or it could have ranged anywhere from back of house to data services. So it's really all across the board. And I think we see that now more and more ever, especially as technology companies offer more products and services.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's already hard enough to work on one brand or one company. Yeah, I know, Matt Ishiba, the owner, formed Player 15 Group as the holding company for the Suns, the Mercury, Valley Suns, and Footprint Center. As head of strategy growth, as part of that sort of role for you on a day-to-day basis, how do you think about growth for an organization now that spans NBA, WNBA, G League, arena operations? And are there sort of overarching growth lever that you're able to pull, sort of aligning everything together?
Sometimes on the last one, for the most part, not really. They're all pretty
Okay.
distinct business lines that all form a really helpful like business growth platform that's focused really on entertainment, right? It's like the NBA is obviously always going to be the big one. Our arena
Hmm.
business is always is always quietly like very, very impactful when you think about the sheer amount of shows that come through Phoenix. And then
Hmm.
with the WNBA, I see that as a extremely high growth, like sort of business line that's growing. There's some overlaps with it because inherently it is a basketball product, but then there's also a lot of things that aren't. I mean, it has a very
Sure.
different fan base. It attracts a very different kind of audience, but then as it grows, I have to be very careful of of monitoring how it's growing. So I'm careful and mindful of thinking about the overlap. If there's any, I guess there's probably a little bit between the Suns and the Mercury. The Valley Suns sort of, but the Valley Suns in some ways also offers like a huge ad for our NBA team in terms of talent development. But at the same
Hmm.
time, when I think about it as a business growth vehicle, there's just different portfolio items and a larger sort of like diaspora of things that it can help activate on. And there's a lot more behind that too, right? Like we also have a small hospitality business. We have an out of home business that's slowly growing.
Mm.
I think it's all part of a pretty major theme among sports teams that you have to think about them as enterprise value. And with enterprise value means you have to find different business streams that are not so susceptible to wins and losses sometimes.
Right, right. No, that sounds like you have a busy job. Yeah. The way you kind of look at it on tactically day to day, do you just view it as sort of the portfolio with different businesses, and then at some point hoping, like, not hoping, but on the front end, that there are businesses that correlate with each other, associate with each other, actually feed into each other, as part of Player 15 Group that generates sort of a circular economy or circular market in a sense. Is
Well,
that kind of how you look at it? Okay.
yeah, I have to, right? Like, it's if I'm selling mostly a business growth vehicle in partnerships, it's
Mm-hmm.
infinitely more helpful for me to present it as a year-round like marketing platform than anything else. And so having the NBA and
Right.
WNBA at its most basic level offers that. But then it's like the same way as thinking about, they also offer sort of different ways of helping like our partners achieve their objectives. I just have to be cognizant of that. But just the sheer fact that I have that already actually gives me quite a bit of
Mm-hmm.
advantage over some of my competitors in the marketplace that don't have that simply because of just one team in the portfolio.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And now, as you know, there's a lot of pressure across not just sports, but different verticals where executives are being mandated to have an AI strategy. And whatever that means, I'll be honest with you, probably 8 out of 10 people that I've spoken with, are still trying to figure out what does that actually mean. They just know that they need to do it. And the ROI right now, honestly, is still trying to be figured out. Some people look at it from a AI displacement strategy. Some people look at it from optimization. Some people look at it from an opportunity standpoint. But a lot of these people may not have the technical background. So then their organizations are trying to figure out, what does AI literacy mean as a sort of foundational build out for the organization. For you, as well as Phoenix Suns and also, a Player 15 Group, how do you guys build that foundation of AI literacy? Or maybe you guys are already far ahead in terms of it's just application implementations, or do you have any strategy in terms of organizationally, how do you guys integrate AI into the day-to-day and, for everybody to use?
Yeah, we're in the middle of getting like an organizational viewpoint on it. We've just recently established one and are actually now just training our entire organization on making sure that we're at least at the most basic level AI literate, right? That's mostly
Hmm.
based from a generative search perspective. But at the same
Okay.
time, like with most companies, there are probably pockets of people or pockets of teams that are much further ahead of the curve.
Sure.
We, for example, like with many other teams, marketing, we started experimenting with AI created content or AI edited content, at least helping us to
Mm.
make more with our B roll. You have folks that are like myself. I use it a lot for research purposes, just my day to day.
Hmm.
But if
Hmm.
that's for like the ceiling of an organization, it's really important to bring the flora. And so I would say, are a representative of a lot of sports teams out there who are still really trying to figure out what that looks like. To your point, in order to actually use AI effectively, I think holistically, you have to have a pretty good technology capability. And that technology capability, if customer data records are important to your business, that
Hmm.
helps clean that up. And I think most organizations don't really have that prerequisite in place to actually fully reap. And if you don't, then you can't really reap the benefits of AI as much as you'd like. But in pocket, sure.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I think data still sits at the central aspect of technology and also
It
what you
does.
can train on, right? First of all, you got to have it available. Two, you got to have structure and also the type of data, the accuracy. That's very important. I think for a lot of large organizations, that's still the biggest challenge before they can even talk about what's the biggest application, like how do you get an ROI out of it?
Like in my world, you know, where our organizational literacy is doesn't really impede my ability to go use AI tools to measure
Hmm.
sponsorship media value, or it
Hmm.
doesn't really impede our ticket sales business from using AI to help support the day-to-day conversations with customers. But that's us using AI through like vendors and using and making use of it as a tool, but turning it on ourselves and figuring out how we use it for our own information. I think for us, that's very much a work in progress. And an interesting thing about most sports teams is that because of the sort of hectic pace that we all operate at, it's like a circus that
Hmm.
happens every few days.
Hmm.
Most of our businesses technologically are supported by a collection of third-party vendors.
Hmm.
And so because of that, it's an interesting twist in the sports side. It's just like the notion of like build versus buy. We're likelier to buy because most of our business
Sure.
operations are built on buying. That's changing
Sure.
a little bit, but for the most part,
So
that's still what exists.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think because of that, I assume once again that's where the partnerships really becomes really a critical component because you do rely on them a lot of times, not only from a strategic standpoint, but also execution standpoint.
Yeah, and it's why with partnerships, like it's alluring from my perspective to want to go chase partnership dollars because that's really
Hmm.
me and my department's mandate. But my personal mandate within my department is to really focus on building out the ones that make a lot of sense. Like, gosh, imagine if you went and partnered. Like one of the toughest things is signing a partnership with someone for a really critical business function. My gosh, like I don't know, something HR tech related, finance, CRM, something that is like through the guts of your company, only to like change away in a couple of years. Oh my God. That's how you get everybody in the
Right.
company to hate you. So when
Right.
it comes to like that, to your point of strategic partnerships, it's like really thinking about what makes sense and how you make the most out of it. And if it's something that's like pretty mission critical, making sure it's a long-term one that makes sense for both companies is really important too.
Yeah, no, that just kind of reminds me of the saying, back in the days at least, and nobody gets fired from buying IBM. And you can probably say the same thing in the recent years. No, nobody gets fired from buying Salesforce. But in a way, I mean that's more of a humor, but in reality, it is true, right? Especially when you're enterprise organization, it's any vendors and partnership you bring in is mission critical because it's something that you hope to last for decades long, and that you can really grow with. So I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think
It's
Ron,
definitely going up to 100%.
right, right. And I'm sure that's going to same from buying process or partnership process, the type of rigor and also due diligence you guys need to do when it comes to AI, because AI is still so early on, but there's a lot of unknowns right now and the type of sort of review analysis you guys need to do before you adopt something. And that's very similar to a lot of conversation I've had, with companies such as Pfizer or even Disney or other companies who are looking at AI, but perhaps haven't really pulled that trigger in terms of purchase or partnerships. And I know, Ron, like you obviously interact quite a bit with executives across the league, right? And just, different type of sports. What do you think is the biggest misconception that sports leaders have right now about AI? And have they
Oof.
found, yeah, no, I'm just gonna put it out there.
I think actually a lot of it is what we had talked about,
Hmm.
overestimating its capabilities, right? I
Mm,
think this is my own personal belief. I think somebody put it, I think this is a pretty commonly used analogy. I hope anyways, right? A lot of people, AI is like, if AI is like an e-bike or the electronic function
hmm.
of the e-bike, you press the button and it helps you out a lot with like a bunch of miles you didn't want to pedal. It's not pedaling the miles for you. And I think a lot of executives make that misnomer of that it will fix something, right? It's kind of like what we had
Hmm.
just talked about. Yes, AI could theoretically help you create a better, more direct relationship with your fans in buying tickets. I mean, the golden goose here for us as it relates to a sports team is to know our fans so well that we can, it's like the classic marketer's dilemma, serve them the right message at the right time through the right medium.
Yeah,
AI can help facilitate that, but AI
yeah,
won't do that.
sure.
What AI needs first is a good database to sit on top. And so I think a lot of executives make that mistake of like, it'll do this for me. No, it will if you have like the foundation in place, would probably be like my general answer to that.
Right, right, right. No, I think that kind of goes back to, once again, a lot of things we just talked about, in the previous questions, which is it's not a solve all. It's not a magic pill. There's still things that need, there's a process. There's also data. There's also people. There's a lot of things that need to come into play to make AI actually effective.
Yeah, it's really interesting for us now because I think, to show this hypothetical sports executive some
Uh-huh.
grace,
Hmm.
I don't think sports teams have felt this push for like this need. And when I say this
Hmm.
need, it's this need to create this direct relationship with your customer as much as say like a lot of the mass retailers that we know. But as sports kind of evolves more into like a global business, like the Suns are a
Uh-huh.
hugely global brand, largely because of how global the NBA is as well, right? Now, when we have to start thinking bigger about our business, then getting better with like data becomes naturally an extension of that. And then I think along with it comes AI, or in some cases, like I want to use AI. Oh wait, but my data isn't in good enough shape. Maybe I should take care of that it first, and then maybe I could start taking advantage of AI.
No, absolutely. And as you mentioned, sports is a content business now. So content, inevitably, there's data, there's histories, there's like CRMs that's being used. No, when I was talking to a buddy of mine that works at TikTok, it's the same way from an advertising standpoint. Now their technology is evolving in a sense where they can help the customers, the advertisers with recommended predictive content that's going to perform well based on their category of product, based on the timeline, based on the competitive set, like what's performing it, what's converting the most. And so I think that's the aspect from a content perspective is going to be really interesting. And I'm not trying to be too predictive here, but imagine a world where all of a sudden the AI is predicting what's going to perform well from an engagement perspective or conversion perspective. And then that becomes all the baseline of the type of content you receive, right? Then the question is, what's going to stand out? And maybe that's when the pendulum sort of swing the other way again.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Yeah, I could totally see that world happening, but how you stand out, that's tough, right? Like the lucky thing
Yeah,
that I have is like I sit on sports, so naturally people already pay more attention to it. I'm not gonna sell like I'm not trying to sell something that is much more doesn't have a lot of like sex appeal to it, like sports. So I have that
right.
advantage here, but you're still right, right? It's funny that you mention advertising because if there's anything I pay attention to today, like in terms of discipline, it's advertising, it's media. And then
Uh-huh.
I try to think about what's happening in these industries and then how does sports fit into there, knowing that I have a really shiny toy to apply it in there. It's less more about thinking about sports now and how it fits into those spaces for me is where I try to find a lot of inspiration.
Yeah. And I think a huge advantage that you guys have is that sort of in-person experience.
Mhm.
People want to be watching the games in person, even if they're sitting in nosebleed seat. They want to be part of that experience, and I think that aspect of it is going to be really hard to replicate from AI. There's nothing better than cheering for your own team. Right next to folks that are have the same passion. Like that type of atmosphere is just really really hard to replicate.
Might be
So
someday. Feel like,
yeah,
I feel like VR is taking a swing at it, but still kind of not. And then, I
yeah.
think you have businesses like Cosm who I think are doing some really interesting stuff and trying to bring the atmosphere out. And
Mm,
someday there will be. Where AI fits into that, I'm with you, as I don't know. But
yeah.
it will for sure keep happening because think about it this way. I used to work for a Manchester City executive,
Hmm.
and he helped me frame my thinking really well about this. You know, he told me one day, I don't know, I was just blowing up with like 1,000 questions about what it was like working at the Premier League. And he said, well, think about it this way. At most, probably 2 to 3%, maybe, of City fans will ever come to Etihad Stadium. Maybe. Probably
Hmm.
lower than that.
Hmm.
So if you accept that, then you would think about your business totally differently, wouldn't you?
Hmm.
You'd have to think about how you serve that 90 something percent that's out there in the same way that
Hmm.
I don't know what the percentage is, but I'm sure most Disney fans in their life will never go to a Disneyland or a Disney World. So how did they
Hmm.
serve those people? Even just knowing that, like the people that come once have to be served differently than the people who have a season pass versus people who will
Sure.
never come, right? So in some
Right.
ways, I think sports has to think about that as those audiences become more different in terms of how they engage with your brand.
No, really good points. Really good points. And then last but not least, I want to come back to more sort of philosophical side of your life and also your view. I love that you mentioned like the hiring philosophy that you have is looking for people with strong work ethic and genuine curiosity. And I can definitely see that from your own journey. So specifically those people who understand like why someone is asking you something, not just what they're asking. Can you give an example of how that curiosity shows up in the interview when you're meeting folks to hire on the team?
Yeah, it's a really good example. When people ask about why I ask questions or people that really put some thought into the ask, I know that's like a really vague way of answering that, but it's just a different way of talking about context matters, right? We're always taught not to question everything for the sake of questioning it, but also like
Uh-huh.
understanding what context something is being asked on so that you can deliver a better answer or even over deliver on an answer
Mhm.
is something that's sort of like behooved me. And so I always look for it. So I was always the kind of professional where if you asked me for something, I would come back with that and more. Or while I was scoping it out, my God, I think I'm still a consultant at heart. While someone's asking me for something, I will always ask them things like, well, who's this for? What are we going to use this information for? And I don't do that to sound like a smartass. I objectively am a smartass, but I don't do that to be a smartass. But I do that just so that I can understand really like how I could get the most out of my work and selfishly, like as we're all interested in developing our careers, showcase
Uh-huh.
more of myself. And so I think about looking for that when I typically interview folks. And
Mhm.
there's no real strong markers. It's usually a sense, I call it like a sense of curiosity of like, how
Mhm.
much is this person actually asking about the business? How much is this person asking about where this department fits into the business? How much is this person asking about what I do for it? And then by consequence, what they would do and how they would impact it? I don't need perfect answers. I'm, for the
Mhm.
most part, interviewing very junior people that have little to no professional work experience. But the kinds of things that I'm asking for are all
Mhm.
really personality based and have nothing to do with someone's track record.
Mm.
Here's a really good way I like to ask people. I usually like to ask somebody what's the thing they're most proud of that they've ever worked on. It doesn't have
Mhm.
to be professional. It can be academic.
Mhm.
It could be like a gingerbread house with your niece for all I care.
Mhm.
But how much they put into thinking about the whole thing and what it meant and what they say about it really shows whether someone was thinking about what their task meant in the broader sense, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. And it also gives you a view in terms of the way the brain process, also the critical thinking skills, whether they have a mental model they're using to solve those types of skills, those types of problems as they come up at work.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
something that shows like good self-awareness
Hmm.
is also really helpful. Actually, incredibly, one of the best answers I got to that was about how someone like made one of the biggest mistakes of their career.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
like their recovery from it was the single thing they were the most proud of. And like I was actually really, really self-reflective. I really admired that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Resilience is an asset that anybody can have.
Yeah, we have to be unafraid to ask questions about tough things.
Hmm.
And I think AI is a really interesting topic about it because we run into so many places where people are just afraid to ask because they don't want to look like an
Right.
idiot. But it's
Right.
okay to because things are getting more complicated. I know that's like a drastic understatement, but like they kind of are. And so you're never going to be the specialist in everything. And so it's on you to kind of be open and honest. And I admire that in people in the workforce and people I want to call a teammate.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Ron, this has been incredibly valuable. Thanks for sharing your journey and as also your insights. So, for folks who want to learn more about you or the work that you do, where should they go?
Please find me on LinkedIn and reach out. depending on where the NBA schedule is, my availability might be limited. I always love networking with people in or
Yep.
out of my industry. Actually, most of my friends in sports would submit that I care more about other industries sometimes because I will blow you up with questions if I find your industry interesting.
That's where the curiosity comes in, right? That's
Totally.
awesome. Yeah. So to everyone listening, if you found this valuable, subscribe to the podcast and share with other leaders navigating AI, commerce, media, and the future of fan engagement. We'll bring on founders, investors, and operators to help us understand technology is transforming all aspects of our lives. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one. To everyone listening, if you found this valuable, subscribe to the podcast AI for Business Leaders on Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, and leave a comment. Please also share with others navigating the future of AI. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.